Hi people. So if you haven't been living under a rock for the past month, you've heard of Squid Game, a show about 456 debtors who decide to risk their lives playing children's games and the chance of winning billions of won and changing their lives. Each of the main characters with their complex struggles have to find different ways to survive, creating allies and using their mental and physical abilities to best the game. The show itself has amassed crazy success, becoming one of Netflix's most popular shows, even ahead of shows like Bridgerton. The series has also gained Netflix $900 million in revenue so far. Roblox did a takeover of it, which went viral on platforms like Twitch and YouTube. Halloween costumes, Weeha, June, and possible second season, the show has absolutely exploded. Articles and media online are fascinated with the show's overwhelming success, but very few look into the story of it. What Hwang Dong-hyuk, the director, was trying to tell us. I would argue that's what we should be focusing on. I want to explore in this video how Squid Game is a metaphor for the violent and destructive system of capitalism and how it tells us more about our society than we care to hear. First, I want to explain the ending of Squid Game. So, to any of you who haven't watched the show, beware. There are spoilers, lots of them. That's kind of the point. Then in the next part, I want to explore the messages of white validation and how white supremacy in society is shown through the show. Next, in the third part, we'll talk about characterization, lacing the characters into this great metaphor. Then finally talking about equality in capitalistic societies and relating that to Squid Game. Before we get into the video and the content, I do want to say thank you guys so much for the success. It's made me, well, the success, the recent kind of success of some of my past videos. My decades video was my first video to reach 100 views. I thought it was going to be my animation, which has almost 100 to 80, and it's just crazy to me. Like 100 in the grand scheme of what you can achieve on YouTube isn't a lot, but it means a lot. Like it's crazy because I mean I've never done it before, so it's still a win in my book, and I really just do appreciate you guys. And even in the second episode of Decades, it still got 38 views, which to me is it's like way, I don't say it's way over what I usually get, but it's far over what I usually get. So I really do appreciate that. You guys have been great, and we reached the goal of getting 20 subscribers while I've been trying to work on this for like the past 2 weeks. So I appreciate that too, and I either want to do something for 50 subscribers or 100 subscribers. I feel like people tend to do something for 100, so we might do that then. But the next goal is 50. So tell your friends, tell your family to come and join. Come and tell your dog, tell your cat. I don't know what I'm talking about, but tell everybody about the channel, about what we're doing over here. It would mean the world. So thank you guys so much. It's probably best that we get into this discussion because I wrote script and this thing is 10 pages long. So without further ado, this is the video. To understand the rest of this argument, it's integral that I explain the ending. It uncovers the scheme and rampant inequality of the game. The end of Squid Game begins after Gi-hyun, our main character, has killed Sang-woo in the final game and returned back to his hometown. On the ride back, he sits in limo with the front man, the antagonist. He's beaten up and miserable because he's just watched his friend die, and he questions the front man.
왜 이런 짓을 하는 거지?
경마 좋아하시죠? 당신들은 말입니다. 경마장의 말. 의외였어요. 당신은 얼마 달리지 못할 줄 알았는데.
누구야 너?
그냥 꿈을 꿨다고 생각해. 당신한텐 그렇게 나쁜 꿈도 아니었잖아.
It's the start of Gi-hyun's intrigue into the game. He wants answers, but of course the gas goes off and Gi-hyun passes out. They drop him off on the streets of Seoul, nearly dead, but with a new debit card. That's good, I guess. The first thing he does when he returns is he checks his bank account and he sees 46.5 billion won, or $39 million. On the way home, he stumbles across Sang-woo's mom and gives her money. In the final game, he made a promise to Sang-woo that he would take care of his mother, so that moment is Gi-hyun fulfilling that promise. Once he returns home, he finds his mother dead on the floor. She was already suffering from diabetes before he left, which was his main motivation for continuing the game. However, now that motivation is dead, and Gi-hyun falls into the state of depression. Every motivation, every reason, every action was completely pointless. All of those people dead for no reason, and Gi-hyun now has to live with that trauma. A year later, the only thing in his life that has changed is that he has a beard and longer hair. He hasn't spent the money at all. He's just let it sit there. He encounters a street vendor wanting to sell him a flower. Reluctantly, he pays for it and finds a card similar to the one that initially invited him to play the game. On the back, where there would normally be a phone number, it says Gangbu, the name, I hope I'm saying that right, the name for his friend in the game, or nickname, Player 1. He goes to see Player 1, Oh Il-nam, in his this high-rise building that's practically empty except for a hospital bed. There he is, laying there on his deathbed. Gi-hyun is insanely confused. How is his friend that died in the game alive and somehow connected to the game? Il-nam then drops the biggest bomb of the entire show, that he founded the games. He was just so rich and so bored that he thought, you know what? Why don't we have a bunch of people kill each other? And then we like profit off of it. Yeah. I feel you, man. I feel you. Power to the people. Yeah, I get you. He goes on to explain his fake death scene in the marble game. In that game, Il-nam appeared to be having a dementia episode and was struggling to play the game. He kept wandering around the set, imagining the fake houses were from his neighborhood as a child. Gi-hyun finally convinces him to play the game, and in desperation chooses to trick Il-nam to his death. Before Il-nam's death, there's this moment where he's brought back to reality.
기억 안 나? 우리 손가락 걸고 깐부 맺은 거. 깐부끼리는 네 거 내 거가 없는 거야.
Gi-hyun walks away and you hear the gunshots, but the show has a pattern of communicating to the audience when a character is dead and when they're not. Every time someone is dead, they show the body. I'll get into something else regarding that later, but it's very unclear whether Il-nam was aware the entire time or not. Maybe he wanted to intentionally have that moment with Gi-hyun. There's also the theory that he intentionally chose to be eliminated in that round. There were signs that his dementia were getting worse, like him peeing on himself right before that game. So maybe he thought it would be best to end his run there. If you look back at the show though, there are a few signs that he was in control the entire time. If you look at the end of the marble scene, they show a shot of the entire set and you see all the dead bodies except for his. It also explains why the host wasn't able to meet the guest. Back in the high-rise building, Oh Il-nam asks Gi-hyun to play a final game with him after Gi-hyun expresses how effed up his justification was for killing hundreds of people. There's a drunk homeless man on the street. Will someone help him by midnight? Several people walk past this man. It's snowing, cars are running by. Everybody is fully aware of this man's existence, yet they never stop to help him. Il-nam uses the game to justify his actions. The world doesn't care about men like this, and why should they? They're nothing. It's a metaphor for the game. Human beings suck, so why not exploit that? However, in the final moments before Il-nam takes his last breath, before the clock strikes 12, the police come to help this man, and Gi-hyun says,
당신도 봤지? 당신이 졌어.
Il-nam lost at his own game. Even in his final moment, he failed to learn from everything he had done. After that conversation, Gi-hyun is able to find purpose in spending the money. He dyed his hair red, and in the final scene, we see him about to board a plane on to America to see his daughter. Before he can step foot on the plane, he catches a familiar scene. The same man that invited him to play the game is with another participant. Gi-hyun's like, hold up, we still doing this? Run it back. And so he runs after him. Not able to catch up with him, Gi-hyun has this fire like lit like reignited inside of him. So instead of going to America to see his daughter, he decides to continue to search, presumably for whoever is keeping the game running. I could have a whole conversation about Netflix's choice for season 2 and how like slightly ironic it is, especially with what we're talking about. But whatever, man. Whatever, you do you, boo. This ending scene is the perfect setup for this argument. It illustrates to us this system of inequality that's perpetuated by people who view us all as playthings, as pawns. It also shows the viewers that the effects that the system has on all of us. Capitalism is so often thought of as a secure and near-perfect system, especially compared to other systems like communism. But societies like America in particular show us that this is a false reality. The only reason it works is because we fail to recognize that it needs to be fixed in the first place. We keep people of color, for example, in places of poverty for control. A wealthy capitalist society like America has had every chance to uplift marginalized groups or give Black people reparations. In fact, they've thought about doing it several times. But when you place people below you, you can easily control them. The message of maintaining equality is brought up in the show a lot, but that desire isn't for equality, it's for control. And one of the main ways we see this is reflected through the VIPs. I don't think it's a coincidence that all the VIPs, or almost all of them, are white. Hwang could have chosen to make them Korean like the rest of the cast, but intentionally he chose to make them white. Who do we see at the top of American society? A bunch of white men. And then that one Black dude. You could also think about colonization, which was white Europeans' control over a large quantity of the entire world. Like these VIPs, they looked down upon people who they deemed to be lower than them, whether that was based on race or civility or poverty. What I know for sure is that in art, decisions aren't made for the hell of it. They're always purposeful. Whenever I make a painting, I'm not putting that figure right there in the middle just for, you know, the joke of it or just for fun. It means something. Hwang knows that this image of white men being in charge or holding control is familiar to everyone internationally. All of these men being white except for one is a symbol for who represents capitalism, who perpetuates the system. These VIPs have come from different places all around the world to bet on human beings living or dying while they casually sip their wine. All fancy like. Including these characters reiterates wealthy society's disposability of the poor that we just talked about with Ilnam. My sister and I had a huge conversation after we finished the show, and we both found it interesting that this Korean man who founded the games and possesses full control of it all is allowing for his own people to be bet on by white men. It brings up thoughts of white validation, how prevalent that is in Korean society. Now, I can't speak fully on that as I am not Korean, as you know, you may be able to tell. But from my knowledge of Korean society, attributes like fair skin, fair hair, fair eyes are favored in Korean society. They are seen as more beautiful. We even see in the hair parlor when Gi Hyun dyes his hair posters of white people. This may seem like a slightly insignificant detail, but as a Black girl growing up in America, I know that it's not at all. To see this message of beauty being shoved in your face and for you to look nothing like it, it leaves a scar on you. There have been so many times when I've worried about not being beautiful in someone else's eyes because of the color of my skin, but I got over that because I'm gorgeous and F them if they got a problem with it. Once again, Hwang wouldn't put that detail of the posters in the beauty shop if it didn't mean something. Nam not only being corrupted by wealth but by his own society in a sense would allow for him to make a fundamental decision like having white men bet on Korean people. Another thing I want to touch on is the splash of Asian fetishization and Orientalism that we see in the story. The way the line VIP was behaving, I knew he was sus. I knew there was something up. The way he stared at him while the detective was standing there minding his own business gave me a signal that something was about to happen. The Lion VIP asks for the detective to sit next to him and tells the entire room that he's going to keep him for himself. Once again, sus. Mr. Detective is shaking in his boots at this point. Then Mr. Lion Sir makes a comment that solidifies my suspicions.
What pretty eyes you have.
Like, I know my man's is fine, but like, back off, okay? Afterwards, he asks for him to take off his mask. This, however, would be violating a very integral rule for the staff, which is if you take your mask off, you die. It's their goal to keep all the staff at an equal and anonymous level. The detective explains this to the VIP, but he doesn't care. So instead of dying, the detective makes a suggestion to go to another room, which they do, and the VIP undresses himself, expecting the detective to, you get the point, okay? But then the detective pulls the ultimate power move, as he should.
If you can satisfy me in 5 minutes, I might let you leave.
Moments of the VIP aren't due to legitimate interest in the detective, it's a fantasy. This continuous comment about his eyes, a feature of Asian people that was commented on frequently in society, helps us as the audience key in on that, fetishize, to have an excessive and irrational commitment to or obsession with something or someone. Also, the lack of care for his life, but rather what he can offer him sexually. The use of fear and power, it definitely crosses the line from fetishization to unconsensual sex, or I can't say the actual word because YouTube will suppress my video, but you get what I'm trying to say. Another trope in Asian fetishization is submission, typically in regards to women, but obviously it can be in regards to men as well. The idea that Asian people submit to white people and are helpless to them. We see this in the way that the Lion VIP forces the detective into this position of submission, forcing him to sit next to him and be his plaything, or whenever they go into the room and there's this camera angle of the detective on the ground kneeling while the VIP is standing up. Hwang very subtly shows us a lot of messages of white control and power and how it tends to suppress other cultures, in this case Korean culture. And he shows it several ways: sexual control, mental control, economic control. Although focused on the Korean experiments in regards to this relationship, it's universal. Most people around the world are likely to share the same experience, as white society has forced itself into literally everywhere. Concepts like fetishization and internalized racism are things we deal with all around the world. And to touch on this internalized racism in Ilnam we discussed earlier, let's move into our next section, characterization. Each main character in the show is a metaphorical archetype. They help to contextualize this metaphor that Hwang has created. Ilnam, as we've already discussed, represents two archetypes that kind of work together. They both deal with corruption in separate ways: societal and monetary corruption. We already talked in depth about the societal corruption of white idolization and beauty standards on someone. Now I want to talk about the monetary corruption and how the wealthy archetype that Ilnam has represents a system of wealth that allows for poor people to be seen as disposable. Ilnam and his friends exploit the desires of lower class citizens. They play to this dream of being rich and you can pay off your debt, luring in participants. They are obviously self-aware of how inhumane this practice is because they withhold that detail that they might possibly die until the first game where a bunch of people die. He then takes it a step further and decides to participate in the games for fun. It's almost mocking and belittling the experience that these people have to go through, watching their friends and other people die, and placing himself in the position of people who have legitimate monetary issues while he is probably worth like millions of dollars. He views the situation he's put in as fun. It's a challenge. I love the persona that Hwang has cleverly created for Ilnam. You get attached to this sweet, innocent old man, and in reality, he's just absolutely cold-hearted. To continue to touch on the hierarchies of classism, there's the doctor. In the story, the doctor is secretly removing body parts from dead players in order to receive details about the next game. This way, he's able to not only prepare for the next game, but to gain a level of invincibility, similar to Ilnam. The doctor can still die like any other player, but this knowledge creates a parachute for him. He no longer has to rely on instinct or any skill that the games require of him. It helps him escape the lights out scene in every game until one night. Chaos breaks loose, and after threatening to kill one of the staff members, the doctor runs up to one of the game arenas. He's followed by a staff member who tries to talk him off a ledge while also trying to kill him. These people are crazy, man. But then the front man busts in and uncovers the entire scheme. What they were doing goes against the rules of equality the game upholds, so they're shot and then hung as an example. The doctor is an archetype of who we uplift in our society as important. He technically, just like the rest of them, is in debt and down bad, yet because of his occupation, he seemed as worthy of receiving information, worthy of escaping death. It's a very interesting concept and way to show this hierarchy of importance we have socially and even subconsciously. The frontman and detective aren't so much archetypes, but just have an interesting story. The detective goes looking for his brother who has been missing for like 5 years after he sees Gi-hyun at the police station. Gi-hyun has just returned for the first time from the games after being everyone voted to end them. He brings the card he received with the phone number to the police station to report it. The detective has a connection to this card as it resembles the one his brother received a long time ago. From there, he figures out how to sneak onto the island where the games are being held and begins his search for his brother. On this search, he discovers records that reveal his brother as a winner of the games. When he finally meets his brother again, it's on the edge of a cliff before his death, the front man standing before him.
형이 왜?
It's a predictable plot device, but a necessary one. By the two being related, it allows for the detective to be more... the detective's death to be more meaningful. I still think that the detective isn't dead, or they wanted to leave his death up in the air, because similar to Il-nam's death, it's not shown. Which, as I said before, could be a pattern of the determining whether somebody's actually dead or not. Him being betrayed by his brother brings up questions of why he's so loyal to this mysterious organization. Something must be pulling him enough, whether it's fear or passion, to kill his own brother for it. The game's continuing at the end of the season reiterates that question in our minds. Is he or the one continuing it or not? If he is, why? What's his attachment? Which I'm sure is what they want to explore in season 2. Moving on to more important characters, Sae-byuk in this metaphor serves as a contrast to the system. Her main motivation for returning to the games is to gain enough money to rescue her mom from North Korea. Her brother and her have already escaped, him now living in an orphanage. She shares this experience or ties to communism, which we often equate as the opposite of capitalism. It's such an amazing writing to have this character trying to escape from communism with her family, but yet she loses her life to capitalism in a sense. Just like everyone else, she's sold this dream of winning money, but her story makes it all the more compelling. It inadvertently spells out this message that capitalism takes just as many lives with her ironic story. And there are a few minor characters in the game who have very clear archetypes. Han Min-yo, or who I know as the lady who couldn't name her baby, she has the archetype of a clever girl. She uses her words to work her way through the game. She gets into one of the most powerful gangs in the game that way by portraying this helplessly in love, submissive woman. Dok-soo, I hope I said that right, is the thug archetype. He's strong, scary, and tough. We see this in his leadership of the gang we just talked about. He controls them and appeals to them through fear. They know he can help them win a lot of games just simply with the fear he evokes in other players. Lastly, there are the husband and wife who represent the archetype of a couple who is willing to sacrifice themselves for each other because they're so madly in love. We see this archetype in characters like Katniss and Peeta from Hunger Games. This couple is a little bit more subtle in their self-sacrificial nature as they go through the games together for a while. The breaking point comes after the marble game when the wife dies. The husband obviously falls into a point of grief and ends up killing himself during the night. All these characters don't really have some big metaphorical meaning, but I found it interesting that they have attributes that in other films will help them win a game like this. Like Hunger Games when Katniss and Peeta win together because they're in love. Instead, the director and writer chose to focus on an attribute not typically explored in Battle Royale style films and shows: empathy. Sang-woo is a very logical, almost apathetic character. He has a background as a businessman who studied in the US and is generally perceived as a success story despite where he ends up. When Gi-hyun sees him in the games, he's very confused. How did this success story, this person who was set to succeed, land here? Everybody in the game is supposed to be there due to their debt, but we learned in the last game that Sang-woo's main motivation is to help his mother. That's why his dying wish is for Gi-hyun to help his mother. Despite their friend-turned-frenemy storyline, he trusts Gi-hyun to fulfill that promise. The scene and several others leading to this one outline how Sang-woo and Gi-hyun are foils. The term foil is used to refer to two contrasting characters where opposition helps to reveal something important about one or the other. Even before we visually are introduced to Sang-woo, this foil is already in the process of developing. His mother introduces him as a successful businessman who studied at this prestigious school, while Gi-hyun is a deadbeat dad who gambles his money away. You can also see this relationship in the way they play the game. Sang-woo takes a more logical path, while Gi-hyun takes the empathetic path. Their strategies and playing and gameplay eventually cross over into their personal lives, like when Sang-woo makes the decision to trick Ali to his death in the Marbles game. Something we also saw Gi-hyun do, but his decision was just as much out of mercy as it was cruel. He combines both to a certain degree, both logic and empathy. These two grew up together yet went in completely different paths. I think Hwang made this choice in order to highlight this empathy Gi-hyun possesses. It furthers this message of morality, how systems like capitalism disregard that despite how important of a human quality it is. I have a theory that Gi-hyun was always set to win, just like how Il-nam has his predetermined protection. I wouldn't be surprised if that pattern trickled over into other parts of the game, like maybe once Il-nam gained this connection to Gi-hyun, once they became gungbus, or maybe even before that, Il-nam had already decided that he deserved to win. I feel like this would make sense with the value of equality, but yet breaking that rule for convenience and equality. That sounds oddly familiar. Let's finally explore equality, morality, and how Squid Game's exploration of it reflects our own reality. As I previously stated, whoever runs Squid Game wants to uphold equality. We see their enforcement of this rule with the staff's uniforms and its goal to keep anonymity present. We see it when they chose to hang the doctor and the other staff members that participate in selling body parts as examples. There's an obvious effort to keep this policy in place. A very common saying in the US that quotes Thomas Jefferson, "All men created equal." We hear this tossed around repeatedly in the States. It's a value that we seek to uphold, that's sold to us. If you work hard like everybody else, you'll receive success. This same dream is mimicked in Squid Game. These games are modeled off of this very principle, yet both exploit it. In America, we aren't all created equal. The founding fathers of this country didn't truly believe that. They didn't intend for black and brown faces and queer people and immigrants and all of us to be placed under those words. So that never got changed, and it perpetuated itself into laws and rights. Many of those don't protect trans people and people of color. Hell, the freaking Voting Rights Act of 1965 was thrown out completely after being passed for decades. They said, yeah, people don't need to have their voting rights protected. That's dumb. I absolutely hate it here, man. Housing isn't equal, jobs aren't fair. In fact, there are people in this country who actively fight against this equality. And that's without even mentioning the violence and hate that these groups of people receive. Just like in the show, marginalized groups are exploited to keep certain people in power. The characters in the show believe and trust this game because they see no other option. The VIPs are leaders exploit their desire to get out of their situation in order to use them for betting. And although in the first episode they are presented with the choice to leave, there is truly no choice. In the second episode, entitled Hell, it shows their realities in everyday lives, illustrating to us the constant struggles they are placed in. The leaders know that they would come back to the game after being reminded of their realities. They know most people would rather face death if it meant money and possibly renewing their lives. Equality doesn't truly exist in the system. It's a facade. It's used for everything but that. Convenience, exploitation, control. The very principle that it's meant to uplift people is used to keep them right where they are. Morality is a concept explored a lot in Squid Game. When I was analyzing the show to write this, the main character that made me question my own morality was Sang-woo. It would be our inclination to view his decision and choices as wrong, but when I thought about it from his perspective, my mind kept getting confused. What if tricking Ali, although sad, was the best option? What if in the glass game, pushing that man to his death was the right choice? I mean, the clock was running out and anyone would have made an instinctual choice in that moment, so they wouldn't die. In fact, in that scene, they briefly talk about morality of Sang-woo's decision. Ki-hyun is very angry at him, and since we view the show mainly through his perspective, we turn on Sang-woo as well. But if they had just let the man stand there, they would have died as well, so why was Gi-hyun so mad about the decision? Squid Game shows us a lot about society and ourselves. It makes us stop and think. A lot of people compare it to the Hunger Games as they share a similar format, but I would argue Squid Games goes deeper, uncovering an entire system's flaws and connecting real world situations to it. Hunger Games did deal with the discussion of classism, but stayed at that point, never moving anywhere beyond that, especially when they decided to focus more on romance. Squid Game explores internalized racism, morality, equality, and everything in between. Although this video focused primarily on the flaws of capitalism, I only point them out because I want this country to improve. I go back and forth all the time on whether I want to continue to live here. But nobody wants to leave the place they're from, especially if it feels like an escape. Capitalism, and especially the way America has developed it, is extremely destructive and myopic in its awareness, but it can be improved. With media like Squid Game, it helps us to reflect on what we need to change so we can do better for all. We can reevaluate our biases and how we want the system to work for not just ourselves but for everyone. Equality may be used right now for control or is almost used as an illusion, but we can dismantle the system the way we view it and make it what we want. I think what Squid Game teaches us overall, among many things, is that empathy and ruling with compassion is more effective than we perceive it to be. That's why the scene with Oh Il-nam and Gi-hyun at the end is so important. Compassion always wins. Thank you guys for watching the video. I honestly didn't even do this with the intention to answer the thesis statement or like coming to some type of a conclusion with the destruction of capitalism and all that. I just wanted to most importantly explore the themes that Squid Game has, because there's so much to analyze. Honestly, this is just exploring one facet of it, which I guess is the main facet, but I'm sure there's so much more you can analyze. But I don't know, I feel like I kind of went off in tangents, but it is my first commentary video, and I really wanted to use this opportunity with the popularity of Squid Game and my interest in it and everything in it, to try out a commentary video, like a serious one that's not a music review, because I've been wanting to do that. I just haven't really had an opportunity to until now. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope to make another video like this, because even though it was stressful trying to get this whole thing, this script done, it's 10 pages and it took me like 2 weeks to finish, but even though that was stressful, I would love to do it again and next time like pace it out better so it's not so stressful. And I can also put out other videos at the same time. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a good day. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.